would you mind introducing yourself?
I'd be happy to. My name is Eileen Curley Hammond, and I write the Merry March Mysteries series, which is a cozy mystery series. And Mary is a single mom and a divorcee, and her husband has been involved in some very nefarious things. And so she has jettisoned him, and now she's working on gaining her life back. The first book is Murder So Sinful.
Ooh.
And it's a fun book, and I was happy to write it. And now I'm working on number 6.
Nice.
I'm closing in on the end. It's agony, and hopefully I'll be done with it soon. So
I love that name, Murder Most Sinful.
Yeah, it's
Murder So Sinful. Murder.
No, but you're right, because what happened was the thing that so when I was thinking about a series. When you write a series of cozy mysteries, you have to have names that kind of link together, or at least that's de rigueur for the genre. And the thing that struck me was the Murder Most Foul, right? From Agatha Christie.
Yeah, of course.
And so I was like, I kept on thinking, well, murder most something, and I said, no, I really can't do that. And so then I said, well, murder so something. And then, it happens at a church, the murder happens at a church in this book. And so I said, sinful. So that's how I ended up with that title.
Nice. So what drew you to write cozy mysteries?
Yeah, so I was a huge Agatha Christie fan. My mother, my mother was a big mystery fan, and they didn't have like a cozy genre back then, but if you look at it, you might say that some of Agatha Christie's work was cozy mysteries. And so it drew me. I love the feeling of developing relationships, with the people. And I think, you get to know people in cozy mysteries that they're like part of your life, and they grow throughout the series, and as bad things happen to them, so I was really, as I do bad things to them, but so I was really drawn to the idea of cozy mysteries because of, Nancy Drew fan, from Carolyn Kane, I loved that series. So I loved that series too, and so I was really sort of a goner for the cozy mystery thing, and I also don't think I would write. I don't think I'd write good sex scenes, and I don't think I'd write good, killer scenes and stuff like that. It sort of makes me go. So I don't mind reading them, and I love them when they're done well, but writing them, it's a whole thing for me. So that's how we ended up there.
Nice. So have you written any other kinds of I'm guessing that the answer is yes. But have you written any other kinds of fiction than cozy mysteries?
So nothing published. I do have a couple of short stories that I've done that have been, I wrote a couple. I'm part of a writers group here in town in Columbus, and so they've done some contests and stuff. So I've done some things for them, and the other thing that I'm very, very active in is, and I know you're on Twitter as well. They have a thing called Very Short Stories, which is VSS 365. So 365 days of the year.
Talking about that, yes.
Yeah, so 365 days of the year, they come out with prompts, and you have to come up with stories. And so I challenge myself every morning, and I do that. There's also another woman that's on Twitter, which is Helen. Oh God. The brain's gone. Whisper. We laugh because her prompt is at Whisper, right? And so me and this guy Jacob Klopp, who's also on Twitter, we always, whenever we want to write whisper, we always put the T in there, which is not supposed to be in there. So, but I do those prompts every day, and it's a way to get myself limber. Like if you were singing, you might do things to get yourself limber. I do that to get myself limber, and I do something that is horrible from a marketing standpoint. If you write cozy mysteries, you should stay in your lane. Mm-hmm. And I use Twitter to go anywhere I want.
That's good.
Well, it's kind of bad, and then in October, which I've done for the last 2 years running, is I use all the prompts, and I don't know what you don't know what the prompt is going to be the next day, is I write sort of a, ghost or horror story for the month of
Oh,
October using
nice.
the prompts. And that's
Yes,
a lot of
yes.
fun, a big challenge, and I have a
Oh,
lot of fun doing that. And they did a first volume, which was the VSS 365,
oh,
and I had two micro stories in that. So
congratulations. That's
thank you,
awesome.
thank you. So it's that's something I do for fun, but it's very off-brand, but I love it. I mean, I do a lot of murdering people in it, but then I do a lot of fun stuff too. So gotta have fun where you can, right?
That's right. Exactly. Like you could be doing anything right now. Like I gather you're retired,
Yep.
but you've chosen to have the second career as a writer. So
Right.
why write? Like why writing?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting. I was working for a company in Des Moines, Iowa. I did a whole tour of the Midwest in the
Mhm.
United States, and my job was eliminated, and I was 49 years old, and I went into a whole, I wouldn't say panic-stricken mode, but a teeny bit panic-stricken, and I said, well, I have to get a job. And the company that I was leaving, they had signed me up for outplacement services, which I had never done before. And that's sort of to get your resume together, talk to you about what you want to do. And it was the best experience of my life because they made you sit down and say, what is it that you enjoy doing? And what is that you want to do? And one of the things that came out of that was, I will not be happy if I'm not doing writing in some capacity.
Mhm.
So that got me very clear on that. And so that started sort of the wheels turning. And then I ended up getting another job, which was lovely, and worked at that one for 10 years, and then was lucky enough to say I have punched my ticket, and I am now going to go do fun stuff for me. So that's kind of how I got to the writing thing. But I had always, uh, when I was in my late 20s, I got a job. Don't ask me how. I've had a very strange career, but I got this job as a speechwriter for a
Oh,
Fortune 100 company.
uh-huh.
And I was doing the writing for the vice chairman and for one speech for the chairman. And I loved it. It was so bizarre. I mean, it was the most bizarre job in the entire world because you have to be able to tell a story.
Yes.
You have to hook your audience. You have to make sure that you're making the points that you want to make. And then you also have to make it interesting enough, that somebody would want to actually listen to it. So it was really a great challenge for me to do that. And then you have to get the executive to say, yes, I want to give your speech,
Yeah.
or say, this is awful. So I had, a fun time doing that. But one of the stories that I'll tell, and you just shut me down anytime you want to, but one of the stories that came out of that was I was working on a speech for one of the guys, and he came in. It was sort of almost all done, and everything was linking together. When you work on stories, right? You work on all your bridges, you make everything, there's a through line, the whole bit, everything was working. And he walks into my office and he hands me this sort of crumpled up napkin, and he says, I was at the Grand Central bar last night, and there were these two guys, and they were like fascinating. And so I wrote a few things down, and you cannot read the writing. He doesn't remember it because he was drinking martinis, and he's like, work this into the speech.
I mean, did he give you a whole 10 minutes,
Yeah, no, it was fabulous. I was like, okay, yeah, I'll work that in, And so I made up something and said, oh yeah, here it is. It's all good. But it's always fun when somebody, and that's sort of like, when you go out to beta readers, sometimes they'll come back with, uh, I love my beta readers. They are phenomenal, right? And they find things that I would never find. But occasionally they'll say something and you'll be like, no, we weren't going there. But maybe I should, now that you brought that up, and
Book
so
two
anyway,
or, book seven,
it's always
Yeah.
a challenge, but it's been fun, so yeah.
Mhm.
Okay,
So from
to
what
answer your question, and I could go off
No,
tangent.
no, that's great. That's great.
Okay.
Like this is a chat, this is a conversation. Like we're just, two people having our, yeah, do you have a beverage?
I have some water. I will be doing beveraging later. Cheers. Skull.
Well, from what you've said about through lines, it makes me
Yeah.
suspect was another one of my questions. You're bringing them all up on your own, so this is great. I was going to ask you if you're a pantser or a plotter.
Oh, now this is fun because I have listened to your previous, some of your
Oh,
previous
really?
interviews, and I get the distinct feeling that you believe in plotting. Now, I could be wrong.
Well, the way I do it is like I'll write sort of a vomit draft. So just put the
Sure,
ideas down on paper, just get them
sure.
out, right? Better out
Mhm.
than in.
Yes, yes,
But
sure,
and then I'll go through that and then I'll think about outlining and I'll think, okay,
sure,
so protagonist, antagonist, and I'll start doing the outlining and then I'll
mhm,
do the first draft and then that'll happen and then I'll go back and I'll adjust the outline. And so it's sort of a dance between the outline and the writing. Does
sure.
does that how do you do it?
Yeah, not at all like that, but that's good.
Okay.
That's
Instruct
fine.
me, tell me.
It's funny because I talk to people that are plotters, and then there's planters and stuff like that, but I talk to people that plot and they have these outlines. And I was at this one thing when I was first learning, when I decided, okay, I'm going to write a book, and I knew nothing about it, I was talking to somebody, and they're like, oh, I have this outline, and then I take, the little sticky notes, and I write things on the sticky notes, and then I put them all over the floor, and then I do, and I'm like, so what I do is I sit down with my laptop, and I have a blank screen, and I have to write a book.
Okay.
And somehow the book writes. I swear, I go back and I look at some of the things that I've written, and I'm like, huh, how did that happen? Or how did, for my first couple of books, I had no idea who did it. And I'm at like page whatever,
Oh,
and I'm sitting there going, who the heck did this thing? And then when I figure out who did it, I'm like, oh wow, that's who did it. And then I have to go back in and salt the book with some clues, otherwise people will think I cheated, which I don't want to do. So would it be better if I was an outliner? It would be less work,
mm.
certainly, but I don't know that I'd get to the same place, and it's just not my process. I mean, I had, sorry, go ahead.
No, everybody has their own process. That's
Yeah.
that's that's
I mean,
fine.
I
You
had
do what
bosses that
works.
forced me into outlining for my career. They would say, well, you have to give me an outline. And I was like, well, I
Mm.
don't really think that way. And they were like, that's interesting, make an outline. So I was forced into doing it. And I think there's a struggle there for me to do, because I'm like, I'm my own boss now. I don't have to do that anymore. So kind of interesting.
Well,
Yeah.
do you think that possibly because you've done it for so many years,
Mhm.
like professionally in one way or another, that you have more of an intuitive sense when you
I
write?
think I think that's what it is. I think that's probably it. I think the other thing is that even though I say I don't outline, which I don't, in my head, when I've written the days, the work that I've got done for the day,
Mhm.
uh, I go to sleep, and then if I wake up, I start noodling. Where are
Mm.
we going next? And I start thinking in my head, what's the next thing? And well, what has to happen next? And I kind of go through that process as well. So I do think about it in advance, but it is very organic. The process is extremely organic.
Well,
So
it's working for you. I'm curious. How long on average, does it take you to write a book? Like you've written five now.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
And
is there like or does it vary?
so the first one took me a while because I didn't know what I was doing.
Right.
So I was sort of writing the book, and then I was going to seminars, and I was reading books on writing books, and what you should do to set yourself up, and really sort of gaining all such knowledge. So I would say I started working on the book probably I went on a trip to celebrate my retirement. And then when I got back from that, I said, okay, I need to start working on this book. So I probably started working on the book in about February of one year, and it came out in September of the following year.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, but then my next book came out 6 months later,
Oh,
right?
okay.
And then the next book came out 6 months later, and then the next book came out 6 months later, and then I died. And I said, what am I doing? I'm really, so then the next one took me a year, and this one's going to take me a year, so I've decided that a year is probably good.
I think a book a year is fairly
Yeah,
decent in the publishing
yeah,
industry.
yeah.
I mean,
I
six
mean, I
months,
think it was
that's pretty quick.
yeah, and I think it was important writing cozy mysteries you have to get some volume out there for people to notice you. You
Mhm,
really
mhm.
can't, because it's a
Definitely.
series, right? And people get so depressed if they read the first book and they like the first book and there's nothing there for a year. You know,
Mhm.
you have to get a couple out there. So I think that was beneficial. But you know, looking back, I'm like, maybe we could have taken a little time off in there, kind of done some other stuff,
Yeah, yeah. But no, I mean that's great. Well, one thing that I wanted to ask you about that I've asked all the other authors about is when did you, if you recall, do you remember when you wrote your first story, or at least like how old were you when you wrote? Um, do you remember writing your first story? Like, do you remember that, or is that kind of lost to the mists of time?
No, it's funny. I've been thinking about this, and I, I don't remember writing a lot. I didn't journal. I didn't write a lot, but what I would do, is my brother and I, we're like a year apart, and we're baby boomers, so there's 7,000 kids around you. We lived
Mhm.
in a very blue collar neighborhood, so there was, a pack of kids. We would make up the games that the kids would play, right? So I think instead of
Oh,
writing stuff
really?
down, we had this whole group that we could make do stuff that we want to do. So I think that was more what I did. And I'm sure I wrote in high school and stuff like that, because you can't really get out of high school without writing something. So I'm sure I wrote something, but I listened to these writers, these wonderful writers, and they say, oh, I was 11 and I wrote, this, story. And I don't have anything like that. I mean, I've written professionally, in my career, my entire life, but in terms of sort of fictionally playing around, noodling, maybe a couple of things, but nothing. Yeah, sorry, got nothing for you. So,
Oh, that's okay. Do you remember when you started to read?
oh yeah, I read. My mother was a voracious reader, and she read to us when we were, I don't know, it's forever,
In the womb.
the beginning. Yeah, from in the womb. I'm sure she read to us in the womb. I'm not so sure about what the stories were.
Right, right. Yeah, your memory's a bit,
Smoking
on that
cigarettes while I was in the womb too, so that's a whole nother story. But so she was a big reader, so I remember reading like all kinds of stories. But I think the stories that I remember that I was selecting, we moved to a town, one town over, and my best friend was just down the block, and she gave me The Hobbit, and so I
Oh,
read The
nice.
Hobbit, and
Yeah.
I loved The Hobbit. And then I read The Lord of the Rings, and then, I started reading all kinds of stuff. So I read every single genre. Um, Not so much horror, although I have read, some of my friends are horror writers, so I've read some of their books. And that's
Mhm.
just because I don't like to turn off the lights at night after I've written, read something.
Right.
And it's
No,
like,
I get it. I get it after I read Stephen King's It, which is one of my favorite books ever. Uh,
yes,
could not go to the washroom without, like viewing the toilet very suspiciously.
exactly. It's like, need to leave the light on. And yeah.
Yeah.
So I read, I mean, I read fantasy, I read historical stuff, I read memoirs, I read I read everything. So last year on Goodreads, you track your reading and stuff, and my friend Helen, who I will never forgive, decided she was signing up for 100 books, and I was like, well, I could do 100 books, like literally on December 31st. I'm like this reading this book, and of course you had to reread them all, which was fun. So that was good.
Oh yeah.
But
Well, and I'm sure that the authors really appreciated it too.
well, I love we have so many phenomenal authors that are on Twitter
Hmm.
that are just, I mean, the books are mind blowing that are out there. And I just enjoy so much reading people's books, and being an author myself. I know how much reviews mean to you. So I'm always, writing reviews, and,
Oh, nice.
I try, I don't sort of give lower grades on reviews. If I've got a problem with somebody's book, I might reach out to them, by the by and say, oh, you might want to think about this, but, or, I'm sorry, I won't be reviewing. What I do now, this is really terrible to say, I don't tell people I'm reading their books until after I've read them.
Okay.
Because I've had some interesting experiences because people know I'm reading their book and I know they're waiting for a review, and I want to say, I'm not going to review it. Here's the rating I would give you. Here's why I would give that rating. And so I'm just not going to put it out there. And then I've had some interesting experiences with people coming back to me and saying, well, no, you're wrong. And I'm like, no, that's my experience as a reader. It is
Right.
valid, so anyway.
Has anybody ever said, well, thank you?
No, the two people that I did, both came back after me, and at the end we were fine. There was no recrimination, anything. At the end it was just like, okay, fine. I'd rather you didn't put the rating out there, and I'm like, I'm fine with that. I just wanted to say I would put it out there if you're just trying to get reviews. It's a review. I'd get it out there, but it isn't the rating that you'd be looking for. So
right,
yeah,
seems like a good compromise.
Yeah.
So do you remember how you learned how to read? Like, did your parents teach you? Like, was there a chalkboard involved, or did you just kind of pick it up from your mom? Because you said your mom read to you all your life. So do you think you just sort of absorbed it?
Yeah, I'd go with that. My mom just read all the time, and it's just so yeah. I think I absorbed it. We didn't have a chalk. We didn't. My aunt. She and my uncle had a chalkboard in their house, and their kids were taught,
Oh.
And I remember thinking, I'm really happy that I have these laid back parents that are kind of, we'd rather you enjoy what you're experiencing, so yeah, it was more of a osmosis thing. And this is it's a fun thing to do, and you can lose yourself in this story versus, you have to do this and stuff, so.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm glad you had a good experience. So that's the thing. Oh, I was looking at your bio on Amazon.
Yes.
And you say that you have a couple of felines, or rather that they have you.
They have me. It was funny. Somebody on Twitter today said, I have two cats. Somebody, and oddly enough, my protagonist has two cats. Figure that one out.
That's what I was going to ask about. Have you written your cats into your story?
Yes, I do have my cats in my story, and a lot of the stuff that happens, actually happened. But somebody said on Twitter today, they said, when you leave the house, do you tell your cats that you're just leaving for a little bit, for a short time? And I was like, yes, when I'm leaving, I tell the cats, I'll be back soon or whatever, and they just look at me. And then, but if I'm going to be gone for a long period of time, I tell them, well, I didn't want to leave, but my husband made me. So that's why I'm leaving. So it's really his fault, not mine. And that's why I'm leaving for a while.
Do you use that in the books?
I don't use that particular, well, I haven't used that yet. I haven't done that yet.
There we go. That's something.
Yes. But yeah, the cats are definitely a presence in the books, and the last one, which was Murder So Hot, they actually were only in it for a little bit because normally the stories take place in a town called Hopeful, which is where Mary lives. But Mary ended up having to go solve a murder mystery in Phoenix this time. So she was out of town. So the cats did not come with her.
So do you ever think about putting the next mystery in a place where you just want to take a vacation so you can go do research?
I'm not going to confirm or deny that, but yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know where the next. I'm trying to figure out. I'm not sure what's going to happen with Mary. I know she's got this book, and which I'm working on right now, number 6, which I still haven't titled yet, which is why I'm still calling it number 6. And then there's a number 7, definitely. Whether or not there's a number 8 is a whole nother situation. I was searching on Amazon the other day, and you know how you search on something and then it comes up with something else, right? An add-on thing because other people are searching for it. And it was cozy mysteries with more than 7 books, and I was like, oh my gosh, You know, I was searching for cozy mysteries. They added with more than 7 books, and I'm going,
It's a sign. It's a sign.
oh, no. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'll be doing
The
this.
universe does not want you to stop.
Well, you know, it's funny because I have a couple of short stories, like one that I was kind of working on. There was this contest and I was thinking about entering, and I had started working on it, and I yelled at myself and said, get back to work on this book, you know. So there's some other short stories that are kind of like calling to me, saying, come work on me. So
Right. No, I get that. That's a good point. Okay, so you said that you didn't really write a lot when you were young. Like you didn't write a lot of short stories and share them with your friends.
Right. Nope. You know, I told people, I would tell people bedtime stories. So I'd make up stories and just tell them bedtime stories.
Well, there
It's
you
like
go.
people
So
were sleeping over.
that's a storyteller. You're a storyteller. You're a natural.
I think, yeah. So yeah, but people would come for sleepovers and I would tell them stories.
Nice. But do you remember how young you were when you started doing that?
I was pretty young. So you know, probably 7, 8, you know, something like that.
Wow.
You know, so but
Congrats,
I'm sure they weren't that good as stories, you know. But
I bet your friends liked them. Okay, so when was the first novel that you wrote, or the first short story? Do you remember? Like, was that
the first novel I wrote was Murder So Simple, and that was
wow.
it was 4 years ago.
A lot of people are envious of you right now. The first novel you wrote, you know, you got it picked up, and you know they're.
Now I'm self-published, right? So I
Okay, sorry, I thought that you were
no,
through,
do it all on my own. I went to when I was going through 2D Press.
Yeah.
Yes,
so that's
2D
your
Press is my company.
Oh,
And yeah, and that is it's named for my mother. Her nickname was Tootie.
Oh,
And
nice.
and because she had 2 D's in her name. So I said, well, I'm going to call it 2D Press for my mother. And so why did I self-publish? You know, so I went to as I said, you know, when I retired, I said, well, I told everybody at work that I was going to write a book. How stupid is that, right? So then I'm like, okay, I've set the expectation. I've told people, now I have to do something, you know?
That's a great strategy, actually. It gives you accountability, right?
Yeah, it makes you a little crazy, you know? And so, but then I started going out to, you know, I went to, they have a library program here where they would bring in authors who had written like a whole bunch of books. There's a lot of authors here in Central Ohio. And so I went to a couple of those sessions, and everyone, I would ask the question, self-publishing. Now this is probably 5 years ago at this point in time. And I would say self-publishing or, you know, independent publishing or, you know, or traditional publishing. And every single one of them who was traditionally published, right? You know, because nobody was really self-published back then. Said to me, you have to be traditionally published. You can't be you know, it's awful, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh, all right, yeah, okay. But once we had gotten past that, you know, people would say, well, if you're going to do this, you have to have an editor. You know, if you're going to go down that path, which you should not go down, you have to have an editor. And so I was like, okay. So I took that piece of advice, you know, and I did find an editor, you know, so I got an editor for all of my books, you know, and you know, I use professional covers, you know, I use professional covers. So yeah, I don't know. So, but I looked at it and I said, well, I talked to everybody who had been querying for years, and I'm like, well, I'd rather write instead of query, you know, and I'd rather, you know, just. And I'm a type A person. I hate to admit this, but I'm a type A person. I like a lot of control. You knew that from when you were saying, do you want to do this? What are we doing? What are your questions? What are you
Oh, that's great. That's awesome.
But so I said, well, I want control, you know, so I'm going to do control, and I'm going to do it on my own. So I did. But there's stuff that I don't like to do, you know, that's associated with independent publishing. But there's stuff that I do like to do. And I also like the fact that independent publishing is now becoming so mainstream, you know, whereas it wasn't before. people are really recognizing that, there's good work being done in the community,
Oh yeah,
so,
yeah.
as a matter of fact, Ohio, where I live currently, they have a big expo kind of thing, a book fair type thing. And prior to, I think, this year, maybe, they said they won't accept independent published people. It was just a blanket thing. We're not going to deal with you, kind of thing. I'm stating that probably too harshly, but apparently that was the case. So this year I read the rules again, every year I'd read the rules and say, well, can I do this? And they said, if you have an editor, if you have a real editor, right, and you have to send us 2 copies, hard copies of your book, and we'll review it, and then maybe we'll accept you. And they accepted me this year. So
Nice, lovely.
yeah, so it's coming up in April 23rd, the weekend of April 23rd. So I'm excited about that. That's very cool.
Oh, are they actually meeting, or is it going to be virtual?
It's going to be virtual. Normally they actually meet, but I'll be on a panel with quite a few traditionally published authors. And they said, most beloved Ohio authors. I was like, yes, that's me. I don't think that's me, but I'm going to take it anyway.
Sure, go for it.
So the writers group here in town, if anybody, doesn't have a writers group, or is thinking about writing and stuff like that, I love having our writers group. It's Buckeye Crime Writers. They are just phenomenal. And now I started with them, gosh, about 4 years ago, when I first started looking at if I was going to write. And they were so encouraging. And just to have, and back, of course, then you could go to meetings, and
Right.
you could see people, and the people were struggling with the same things you were struggling. And now, I'm actually on the board now for the group. And it is, we meet once a month, and the first thing we do is accountability. Like, you said you were going to be here. Where are you? And then you have to kind of fess up. Well, I didn't kind of get that done, or I did get that done, and everybody celebrates with you, And so
cool.
a writers group, I think, if people can either virtually do them or do them, hopefully eventually in person again, I would strongly tell people.
Well, your writers group, is it virtual? I guess it would have to be.
It's virtual right now, and we've been doing, like I had, I actually had my attorney do a meeting last Saturday where she talked, because we do murders, right? We murder people, where she talked about, sort of loopholes in estate tax law, right? Where you might be able to craft some interesting things. So we have people come in, like we had a police guy come in the month before that virtually. And he talked about active shooter drills, which after the thing in Colorado, he talked about, they said, before they used to tell you to hide, and now they tell you run, get out of there, don't hide, get out, lock yourself in if you can't get out, but there's a whole different mantra. So he was fascinating to listen to. So we have all these interesting people come and speak. This year it's been virtual. Before we would have had them in person. So it's, but we've gotten our stride with virtuality. Is that even a word, virtuality?
Yeah, I think it is now, actually.
I'm gonna go for it anyway.
Isn't it? Should be. No, I think it probably is. How do you, I mean, I think that one thing that authors, I know certainly myself, sometimes it's difficult to motivate oneself to write.
Yep.
And do you have any, like, how do you do it? Do you have writing exercises, writing rituals, or do you just have this peculiar thing called willpower? I mean,
no, on the latter. One of the things that helped me, and I know this is a favorite book of yours, was reading Stephen King's On Writing.
Yes.
I love that book, and the reason why that book had meaning for me is being a type A person. I am also a workaholic, and I found it hard to separate out my writing life from my fun life,
Right.
that I want to do, right? And I couldn't decide, like, when do you stop? How do you stop writing? And so the piece that had, I guess, a real resonance for me was when he said he writes 2,000 words a day. And when he's done with the 2,000 words, he gets up out of his chair and he goes and he does life,
Right.
And he said, And then the other thing that he said, which of course I immediately latched onto, well, if you're a beginning writer, do 1,000. And I was like, yes, I'm going to do the 1,000. So my ritual is I have to be in my writing chair by 10 o'clock in the morning, because if I'm trying to do something right now or late at night, there is no brain left, right? It's just not there. I am not creative at night. I am way more creative in the morning. So by 10 o'clock, I have to be in my chair. I listen to classical music, because if I listen to any other kind of music, I want to sing along. And that's not good when you're trying to write, so I listen to classical music. And then when I finish my 1,000 words, I'm done, and I start by reviewing the 1,000 words that I wrote the day before, right? So I review that and say, okay, that's crap, or this is good, or just reminding myself, where was I yesterday, And then I write my 1,000 words, and then when I'm done, laptop goes away, and I'm out of there and doing things that I want to do or that I have to do.
Nice. Well, so how long do you find it usually takes you to write the 1,000 words? Does it just vary?
So here, yeah, it varies. Sometimes it is. So what I have is I have an Excel spreadsheet, right? Where I know some people like invest in programs and stuff like that. I have an Excel spreadsheet. I just put in my current word count and automatically calculates what my word total is. And sometimes it's like 2 words, Yeah. So some days it's agony, right? But I sit there and I push through it. I make myself push through it. But some other days it's like a half hour and I'm done. But I don't say, well, let me go for 2,000 then. What I do then is say, okay, I'm done, click, done. But the other thing is that I find it's sometimes I can't work in the morning. I've got something going on, I have something I have to do, somewhere I have to be. And in that case, I work in the afternoon. It takes me, like what would take me a half hour in the morning takes me 4 hours in the afternoon. So I know I'm going to pay for it later if I can't get it done earlier. So
why do you think that is? Do you think it's because you're kind of tired, or do you think that it's just that you're used to writing in the morning and that it just doesn't kind of feel right?
My brain is fresh in the morning. There's, I read quite a few things on this when I was actually in the work world about, when are you most productive and it's different for everybody, right? But one of the things that they extolled was, some people go into the office and immediately do their emails or something, right? They look at their emails, they look at text, they look at whatever. And if they're doing that in their most productive point of the day, that's like wasted, So, they say, figure out when your most productive point of the day is. And that's the point of the day that you have to grab a hold of and really just keep tight and say, I'm going to do this now, because this is the point where I'm going to get the most return on the effort that I'm putting forth. So it's different for everybody. I know some people that can get up, they like start writing at 11 o'clock at night, because that's their time to do. I know a woman, God bless her, she gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning because she's a school teacher. She gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning and she writes through till like 6, 7 o'clock when she has to get out to go and teach kids all day. But that's her routine that works for her, so people have to figure out their routine, but they do have to get into a routine, whatever that routine is, but for me, I start hearing that classical music. I'm sitting in the chair that I sit in when I write, and that means I'm there. I've gotta be writing,
So do you have a favorite classical song, like which favorite composer or?
Yeah, I do, but that's not what I do. I say to Alexa, play classical music, and then she plays whatever she feels like.
That's a really good idea. I have one of those. I could do that.
Yeah, so she'll play classical music for me, and then and when I'm done, I'll say, Alexa, stop, and she stops, and then I'm like, okay, and then I go on to other music that I like or whatever. But yeah, no, she helps me out with that.
That's a good tip. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have like a rule of thumb when you write that you sort of keep in mind about the number of characters that you're going to have? Because you do need a certain number of suspects, right? And so you're going to need a certain number of clues. And some of those clues are going to be dead ends or red herrings or like whatever.
Yeah.
So could you talk a little bit about what that's like, what that looks like how you think through that, or rules of thumb.
Yeah. So a few things that I've learned, right? Number one, you can't have too many characters. People
Okay.
cannot keep track of them, and it's hard when you've written, you're on your sixth book, because you got to bring in fresh people, because some people you killed off and some people you put in jail. Okay. So, so, so you're like, I need some new people. So you can have people come in and fill storefronts that you had previously. And I've done that. Um, so but people can only have a certain number of characters that they can track, and I have gotten dinged for, you have too many characters, so I'll, my current book, the book that I'm working on right now, I had sent out the first chapter for a couple people to comment on, and one of the comments that I got, because there were some people that had never read, the books before, which you have to keep in mind when you're doing a series. You could have a person pick it up the first time, and they said, do you have to have all these people? And I'm like, well, all right.
Kinda.
Well, I was like, the last one ended here. People are on the flight coming back from Phoenix. Stuff happens that I want to have happen. And so I was like, okay, I've got to bite the bullet. So for me, one of the things I have to do is I have to bite the bullet and put in a character list at the beginning of the book, because once you get to like 6, 7 books, you've got people picking it up for the first time. And people that are avid readers of yours, they don't want to sit through you saying the same thing that you said about people that you've done in like all
Right.
the other
Yeah,
books.
absolutely.
So that's something you've got to kind of weigh out. So how many characters can you really have? I really keep it to, I've got, in each book, I probably have about 6 characters that are strong characters throughout the book.
And so
So
are all of those 6 potential murderers, like, are all of them like suspects?
no, because then that's, so you got to sort of, and then, so those would be sort of core characters, like
Oh, so the 6 are core characters.
they're sort of core characters that might or might not be murderers,
Right.
kind of
Yeah,
done
we're
that.
keeping
They
it
might or might
open.
not be murderers. But one of the things so it's interesting that you asked that question, because I was really struggling. I had to stop with the book that I'm currently working on, because I was like, it's not working. I know who. Well, the bad news is when I figure out who killed the person, like early on, then I'm like, oh great, I know who murdered the person, and it's very hard for me to write that way. But my problem was, I was looking at it and I said, oh my gosh, I can't encourage people enough to watch things like this, but also listen to other authors, right? So what happened was, we had a writer that's here in town, Andrew Welsh Huggins, who writes a really lovely series. He was interviewing, God, an A-list author that I cannot remember her name. Apologies, I read her, I can't remember her name. But he was talking to her, and she was talking about a problem that she had where she didn't have enough suspects, right? And so you've got a rule, right? Don't have too many people. And then I've got to have some suspects here. Otherwise, everybody's going to figure out who did it.
Kind of
Right?
there's those 2 are in tension, right?
Yep, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And so I said, well, okay, I've got like these 2 sort of hard and fast things that are going on here. And so she said, I had to go back and I had to think about, who are the people. And then I was like, it suddenly became clear to me. I was like, I have to use my side characters, right? There's the people that own, the bakery, right? There's people that own, that aren't the main characters. So you have to, but I can pull them in to have them be suspects. So the people don't have to remember the people's names. They're like, oh, that's the guy from whatever, right? So I think, so I give myself a little license. I've got my main characters, and then you have the sort of peripheral characters, not a lot of them, but the peripheral characters who you can then sort of pin things on and weave little stories around them, and their nefarious deeds and what they're doing. So
Oh, very smart.
yeah, so I would say, hold yourself to a small number of characters that you're really focusing in on, and then you can just sort of widen out with your,
Okay.
your bit players.
That makes sense. I think that's a valuable tip. Yeah. Thank you. So in terms of clues, like, do you
Yes.
have like a rule of thumb about the number of clues that you want to leave, and how many of those should be red herrings, or
Yeah.
I mean, is that not a part of your creative process and it just kind of comes to you?
Yeah, I don't think it's a set number, but I never want my reader to feel cheated, right? So I want to have given them, I don't want to put a big banner up and say, killer here, but, but I do want to say, here's a certain amount of, I want them to at the end say, oh, it
Right.
was that person, and oh yes, there was this and there was that and there was this. And the clues, because and so I would in a music wise, like getting to a crescendo, right? You're gonna have these things that come along. You're gonna have to, some of the stuff you're gonna have to say earlier on, that one petered out, right? That one's not a real one. This is not a real one. I just had one today that I just finished writing, and I'm so excited about it. I love it. I had a dead end, and it's I can say it. No, I can't. I better not say it anyway. But it's great. It was great. So uh, so you have to give enough. So I'm not giving you a really straight answer like 6, right?
That's
You
fine. No,
have
no,
to
that's
give
good.
enough. You have to feel at the end that you've given enough for somebody to do the aha thing at the end. Oh, I didn't know it was that person. And it's interesting because this is why I would say, beta readers, traditionally published or independently published, right? You should have beta readers,
Oh,
right?
definitely. Definitely.
Because, they are so valuable. And I have interesting beta readers, right? I have my uncle actually is a playwright, and so I send it to him, and he's got a
Oh,
totally different
nice.
take on things. And I
Yeah.
have an actuary who's totally into numbers and linear thinking, and he'll like tell me, oh, this doesn't work because this doesn't link to this or whatever. And then I have somebody who's actually sort of more of a, I don't know, she's a middle grade writer, but she also does some romance stuff, and she'll tell me, oh no, you didn't like explore this scene enough and you need to put more around that. So having different types of people, I think, is also very helpful. And I sort of have a rule of 3. If I hear the same thing from 3 people,
Mhm.
from 3 beta readers or my editor and a couple of beta readers or whatever, you have a problem, right? It's up to you to figure out how to fix it. They might not have the right solution,
Right, right.
but you have a problem and you need to fix it. So
That is actually valuable. Yeah, that
that
makes
is,
sense. So, how did you find your beta readers?
yeah, so interesting. One of the beta readers, the actuary, was actually, I had 2 bosses with my last job, and he was one of my bosses. And he also writes books. He's never published anything. He sort of writes them and puts them in a, shelf. I've never read anything that he's written, but I have so much respect for him as a writer, he just does such a good job for me. He's really detail oriented. The other person was somebody that I actually worked with as well, and she's a writer, and I had worked with her, and so I had asked her. My uncle is my uncle, you know, so that's how I got him. And so I sort of lucked into them a little bit, and then my writing group, we have sort of critique sessions, right? So I can bring a scene or I can bring a chapter or whatever and get their feelings on the scene or chapter. So it's kind of what I do. Beth Anderson, who's on Twitter, she has a whole thing on how to get beta readers. She
Oh,
works it. I mean, she has people apply to be beta readers, you know, and then she just, and her books are phenomenal too. So she writes fantasy and she does just such great work. Um,
so
so
how many,
yeah.
if you don't mind my asking, how many
Okay.
beta readers do you have?
I only have 3, and then my editor said before. Oh, sorry. My husband, I'm sorry. He's an alpha reader. I would call him an alpha reader.
Right.
And he's somebody that just doesn't pull any punches, and he doesn't do a lot of reading, but he reads mine, because he's a lovely husband. And he'll tell me, he'll say, oh no, you can't do this, or, oh, this is not working, or whatever. He's very good at that. So I let him read it first. And then once I make any changes that I want to make according to that, after I've done my scrubbing, then I send it out to my beta readers. And then when they're back, I make all those changes and then I send it to my editor.
Okay.
So there's a whole, and you got to get beta readers a month. You can't give them any less than a month because they have lives, right? So you
Right.
have to, and you have to ask them, is this a good time for you or a bad time for you? And I've been lucky so far because my beta readers have been able to.
Oh, that's good. That probably means they like your books.
Yeah, they're so nice. They're so sweet. It's just lovely people.
Okay, so I read the first chapter of your first book
Yeah.
that you kindly sent me. I noticed that the first chapter ended with a hook, and that the hook was a handsome guy, coming
Yeah.
to the protagonist's life. And
Yes.
I was wondering, is that like, so do you try to end like in your books, like do you try
Yeah.
to end the first chapter with a hook? And that's one question. And then the other question is, do you always have a romance in your books?
Uh-huh. So yes and yes. Cozy mysteries generally have some type of romance element to them. And I also, one of the things that I try to do in my books is I try to make them sort of like real life, like these might be people that you might happen to say, so you're going to find flawed people. A lot of times my murderers actually have some issues that made them do the things that they did, so there's always sort of reasons and rationales and stuff like that. I was a psychology major in like college, so I'm like so I want to know why people are doing things, and I think there are reasons why people do things, and so I'm into that. But in terms of books, um, I try to end each chapter with a hook that makes somebody want to read the next chapter and not put it down. So it might be a hook that's romance related, which is what this book was. It might be a hook that's murder related, or something, just some sort of hook that, you want to, I always think of things sort of, I don't do music, so I don't know why I think in terms of music, but you want to like have a dun 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 dun, as you're like sort of, so that person goes, oh, and then has to read to the next chapter. So I try to do that. I do that. I do that, I think, more successfully in my later books. That's one of the things. That's the other thing, is when they say to people, write, continue to write, I think that, I like my first book. I think it's a good book. I like the plot in it. I like what happens in it. The writing is not as personal and as good as it is in later books, And so sometimes I toy with going back and sort of rewriting it, and I'm like, no. So
Well, okay, so you've learned quite a bit between like writing your first book and now you're working on your sixth book.
yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about what you've learned?
Yeah, so I know you're going to ask me this later, but one of the things that I was not good. Oh, my editor, I had a different editor for the first two books, and I've had the same one for the last three. Is the one that I have currently is a screenwriter. Her background is screenwriting, and so she is very visual, right? And I'm not. so so one of the things that what I love about her is that she'll just put in the margin, or whatever, she'll do a little comment. She'll say, what does this look like, right? What's happening. And so and then also, doing my writing for Twitter, where you have to fit everything into this little 280 characters. um uh, it's trying to set the scene, how important scene setting is, and so I think, I I read this, for this Ohio Anna thing that I'm doing. They had me do, I did my first reading like online, kind of thing, where you're doing this reading, and I'm like, oh my God. And I chose this scene from my the book that I just published, Murder So Hot. It was published in September, and it's this very sort of agonizing scene. This one, oh, you'll love this, because normally my protagonist, Mary March, right, who is the star of the show, she was the star of the show for the first four books. And then because I left the fourth book on a cliffhanger, never do that. Never, ever, ever do that. So I couldn't cheat my readers and not say what had happened to the cliffhanger. I mean, sometimes authors do that, right? They skip right ahead and they said, well, we'll sort of deal with that. And oh, by the way, later on. I think that's my feeling. I think you're kind of cheating your readers. You set them up, you left them there, you have to bring them home. And because of the horrible things I did to my protagonist in that book, I ended up having to do multiple points of view. right? So I went from first person, one point of view, right, to I ended up with two really. There's two at the beginning, but they go away. And then there's isn't that wonderful? They go away. And then there's two later, but then the rest is from two different perspectives. And that was a real challenge for me, but I had to do it that way. And then the other reason why I had to do it that way is the guy that this book is sort of about. He is adopted. He's adopted, and he is going to Phoenix to meet his birth mother. And so that's the scene that I read. And it is so emotional, him being on this plane, going to meet his birth mother. And I see, I could never have written that 4 or 5 years ago, right? But now I'm like, oh, you got to put it on the page. I'm like sitting there trying not to cry as I'm reading this scene.
Really? Oh.
And some people say to you, they say, do you cry when you're reading it? And it's like,
well, yeah.
Oh my God, in my first book, I had to kill off somebody I didn't want to kill off, right? I did not want to kill. And when I was writing that scene, I was a mess. I was just like, crying.
Well, I mean, tell me what you think about this, but I think that if the writer doesn't feel that emotion, that there's no chance the reader's going to.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, So I would say I'm far better at scene setting, because people made me be. I love it now. I do love it now, because now when I'm writing a scene, like the scene that I told you that I wrote today, right? I just loved where it ended up. You have to be emotional about it. I agree with you. I just find, some of these things that you're like, you step back and you say, I can't believe I wrote that, right? And then number two, you're like, oh my God, every time I read it, I cry, So, but the books are generally very happy and happy things happen.
Oh no, well, yes. I mean, I think that you need both. I mean, if they're not kind of happy and you're attached to the main characters, you're not going to be crying if they're in danger or bad things happen to them, right?
Right. No, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Have you ever thought about using a pen name? Like if in the future, let's say you want to write a thriller or something like this, would you ever think about doing that under a pen name or?
Yes. Yeah, I think I would. If I was going to write something that would be very, very off cozy brand, which I might do in the future, right? I would absolutely think about a pen name, because I read somebody's book. They're not into series, really. So I read their first book, which was really cozy. It was great. It really gripped me. I loved it, And then they came out with a second book, but it wasn't part of that series. And I picked up the book, and there is the most gruesome murder that's described in great detail in the book. And I was like, and I read those, right? It's not, but I need to be prepared. And so I think in that case, if you're going to do something very, very, very different, I think you need to give the reader some sort of clue. Hey, this is totally different from what I've done. And a pen name is a good way to do that. So I think, I think I probably would consider that, but have not, had to do that yet.
You are a writer and you had a career in marketing. Can you give writers like any advice on how, especially, self-published writers or independently published writers, how to market their books?
Yeah. So I would say that's any writer, because publishers by and large today aren't going to market your books for you either. So it's kind of a thing. I think my most important piece of advice is you're going to have to put yourself out there. So a lot of writers are introverts, I'm happily along the scale. I'm not a total extrovert, but I'm happily further along that side of the scale. And a lot of people don't want to put themselves out there. So they have to do interviews like this, right? Where you're actually talking to people, where you can say, where you can point people, oh, here's this interview that I did, and I was talking about books and stuff. I ended up, there was a book expo here in town, and I said, well, I've never done a book expo before. I'm going to go to the book expo. And so I had to do all sorts of things to get ready for that, and you can't stand behind your table, right? You have to go in front of your table so that you're talking to people,
Yeah.
But so you have to do stuff to get out of your comfort zone. And they had a thing in Indianapolis called Magna Cum Murder, which they had.
I love mystery writers are so penny. I love them.
Fun. It's fun. It's a fun thing. And so I was like, well, I'm going to go the first time, and I'm going to, I have my first book out. My first book was out, and I said, well, I'm going to go just to sort of be sub rosa and like walk around and get a feel for the thing and everything. And I did, and I went up to an author signing. I went to different things just to experience it all. And then the next year, I went, hello, I'd like to do, a couple of panels, and they were, nice enough to say, yeah, we want you to come out and do some panels. And so I did. And some of the panels, I have to tell you, some of the things that you get selected for, like this one panel was so, I had no idea what they want us to do, so I just made it up, So you do have to sort of get out there. You have to get outside of your comfort zone, do the signings, have a presence on social media, and it means more than just, sort of cataloging your posts, right? Scheduling all your posts so that they just come up when you want them to. You have to be a real person out there, right? You have to feel like people want to talk to you. I'm very, very active on Twitter. I am less active on Facebook, which is terrible because I write cozy mysteries, which means I should be all in on Facebook, but it's so it's a screwy platform. I haven't gotten, I should spend more time on it, but I don't. But
Facebook's a bit of a mystery to me, so.
Yeah, I can't figure it out. Anyway, and then I'm on Instagram. And then people are saying now you got to be on TikTok, and I'm like, no, it's a bridge too far for me. It just is. Sometimes you just got to know. And I listen to.
Yeah, you have to stay within like your, right. Like you stretch yourself, that's good, but there is such a thing as a bridge too far.
Well, and you also have to say, how much time am I going to spend writing, which is going to earn you more money and get you that list, that backlist on Amazon, right? And then how long, how much time you're going to spend on marketing. So you've got to really weigh that out too.
Right.
And for me, I spent a lot more time on writing in the first couple of years, because if you don't have the backlist, nobody's going to look at you anyway, right? So I spent a lot of time on that, and now I'm really doing a lot more active marketing.
So you're doing a lot more active marketing right now. So what does that consist of? Like posting on Twitter, posting on Facebook? Yeah. So what kind of things do you post on Twitter?
On Twitter, well, I post my writing,
for your short stories.
Stories, stuff like that, right? Just so people they see and say, oh, she can write, so you get your writing out there. The other thing is you get people to know you, so they know that you're a real person, right? And so you get some sympathy buys, right? People say, well, she's a nice person, I want to get her book. So you hey, I'll take anything, right?
Sure, yeah.
So you get yourself out there, you get people to know you, and then you interact with people, you cheer on people when they have a success, right? You cheer on people when you read their book and you love their book. You talk about it on Twitter, and you leave a link to their book and say, on Amazon, say, hey, this is a phenomenal book. This is why it's a phenomenal book. Here's my Goodreads review, or here's my whatever. So you become a cheerleader for other authors, because, they want you to do that too. And I'm not talking about a quid pro quo thing, because I don't see that a lot, but what I do see is, people see you being nice to other people, and they're like, oh, this is somebody that is nice. And they write well. And so I might want to, take a look at their books and stuff. So I think,
that makes sense.
So I would just say, you have to be active at something. And right now, with everything kind of shut down, right, So, but then I also, I do, I try to give back. So through my, through the Crime Writers, Buckeye Crime Writers, I schedule things for people, and then I'm, on all the time doing interviews with people and stuff like that. So
nice.
Yeah.
So in the before days, when we went to things like writers' conferences, did you hand out like some people they get business cards made or something like that, or like bookmarks or something like that?
Yeah, I do bookmarks. I do bookmarks. So I did bookmarks, which people take, they like bookmarks. That's good. The other thing that I did was, here's my phone with my latest cover. So Murder So Hot.
I love that. That is
We'll do this for you. So that way, if you're out, this happened to me a couple of times. I was out when I'm out and I'm at a restaurant or whatever, pre-COVID, I would have this and it would be on my on the table, but it was always this face up, right? So just in case somebody's coming by, they might ask you about it or whatever, which actually did happen to me in a restaurant once. So doing that kind of stuff, and then when I was going to do this book expo, right, I got a sort of table drape made up, right, that said Eileen Hammond Cozy Mysteries, right, so people wouldn't see my name from across the room when they were walking up. Just things like that, where people can see you. And actually, I could send you a link to it. There's a link on when I did my first expo. I wrote a thing that authors should think about before they do an expo, and they might
please do. Please do.
So I'll send you a link to that. But yeah, one of the biggest things is get a cart to push your books versus carrying all your books in. That's a big one.
Yeah.
So some writing things.
One thing I noticed is like your book covers are gorgeous, and like this. So how did you? I'm guessing that it's an artist that you've commissioned to do your artwork.
Yeah, no.
You do it? Do you do it?
No. Oh gosh, no. You don't want me to do that. I am just awful. I mean, God, stick figures or something. No. What happened was I went to a company called selfpubbookcovers.com.
Okay.
Right? Selfpubbookcovers.com. And what they do is they have people, artists that do it on spec, and so they put covers up there. And then if you want to buy the cover, it's much less than having people do a cover for you, do design for you personally. Mm-hmm. So now the bad news is you don't get, I don't get to put two little cats on the, cover and stuff, because generally there's not little cats on the cover. I could, but I haven't done that. And then I've sort of glommed onto this one artist, right? And I use her pretty much for all my covers. And I've had her make changes. You have to pay extra money to get the changes, and you have to pay extra money to get the spine and the back cover, in addition to the front cover. But it's been great. It's affordable, and which is important when you're first starting out and you're laying out all the money. If you're doing it independent, you've got to lay out all the money. So I've just been so pleased with them. I mean, they've done a great job, and I've gotten great covers. And
okay, well, I will leave the link in the description to that.
Cool.
For anybody who's interested.
Good.
Okay, well, I really appreciate you doing this. Like, it's been wonderful talking to you. I've learned a lot. So that's marvelous.
Great.
So the last question, you know what's coming.
Yeah.
If you could go back and tell your younger self something like a writing tip, what would it be?
I think my writing tip would be, I was a workaholic at work, and so my entire, other than, hanging out with my husband when I had to, no, I'm kidding. Other than hanging out with him, I would be working on things at home that were for work. I would be, like literally 24/7 working, right? And I think what I would tell myself is you don't have to do that, right? You could carve out time in the night or in the morning and satisfy your soul and do some writing, so step away from work, do as much work as you need to, right? But then sort of step away from it and say, I'm gonna focus in on my stuff for a bit. And I think that's what I would have said to myself. And then I would have gotten started on my journey far earlier. Not that I regret it. Everything's been fabulous, right? But I think I would have started earlier if I had carved out some time to do that. So I would encourage anybody that's working, right? Because there's so many people that are working, I'm not anymore.
She says gleefully.
Plan well.
Well, you still are working. It's just you're working on something you love.
I'm working hard, but it's something that I love, and I loved my job before too. So, what are you gonna do?
Well, that's true. That's true. This is a different love.
It's a different love. You're right. And it's all about me love. So it's all good.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. It's been really fun, and I do appreciate this opportunity. And I love your what are they called? Vcast podcast? It's not like a podcast. What is this?
It's
A
it's
YouTube
a
channel?
video blog, maybe, I guess.
Video blog. That's why I love it. Yeah, I love your video blogging. It's so genuine, and I love to hear all the tips that people have. It's great stuff. So.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot to me. And when you publish your sixth book, please do let me
Yep.
know, and I'll tweet about it.
Oh, well, great. Thank you.